Okay, welcome back, everyone. It's week 1, day 2 of Web Fundamentals. And we are going to do our introduction to CSS. And in the afternoon, we're going to do the box model and inline block. After that, we're going to do a group challenge and a presentation at 4. By the end of the day, you want to be done with these assignments: styling, button up, and plotting your blocks. And the homework is to read the flex advantage and justify content being flexible. Tomorrow is where we really want to be. Today's lesson is an introduction to CSS, but we're adding some training wheels that we're going to take off tomorrow. So what you want to get to a full understanding of today's lesson, but then be ready to pivot to another style of using CSS tomorrow. So have that in mind for today's lesson, and let's go ahead and dive in. So we're going to go over the what CSS is and why we need it, and we'll start there. Okay, so we'll start with an HTML document. So let's create a folder for that. I'm gonna here I have something open, so I'm just gonna open a new folder. Somewhere on my desktop. Say new folder, CSS intro. Okay, I'll add a new file, index.html. I'll take what they give us here, paste it. Now, here what I've pasted, this line 7 is a new line, something we had not seen yet before in the lectures. What this is doing is it's linking, it's connecting to another file. The file is called style.css. Okay, so the way we create that file is by clicking that file button there and saying style.css and press enter. Okay, now that you have this style.css file, it's linked here to this HTML. So let's see this HTML file, what it looks like. I want to copy path. Here it is. Okay, this is what it normally looks like because we haven't added anything to this CSS file. So let's affect the background color of it. This is how I usually test it. I say background color blue. Okay, this star is a thing that will select everything on the page. The body, the H1, well, yeah, everything. And then it will set the background color to everything. Okay, I'm not going to introduce rules yet, but this, as you can see, I've added some rule here on this page And the only thing I did was set a background color to everything here. We remember yesterday in yesterday's lessons how I could affect the styling of something if I wrote it in the head tag. If I said something like style equals height 15 or 20 pixels. But what we now want to do, and we also want to avoid writing in the head, is add the styling to a file type called CSS. This adds a little bit more flexibility with the rules that you can write in an HTML file. It will let you, well, first let's start with what CSS stands for. So we've set it up, we've shown a practical example. What CSS stands for is cascading style sheets. Who can tell me what cascading means?
On top of each other.
Say that again.
On top of each other.
So yeah, the rules that you write on the bottom. So if I say, for example, the rules that you write below the ones that you write on top will take priority over the ones on top. So I say the H1 background color now should be white. Let's take a look at what this does. Because I wrote this rule, even though this star selects everything on the page, when I say after the star, I say except this H1. This H1 we're going to make white. That's because this rule, this H1 takes priority over the star when it's written below it. So it makes an exception for this one. If we were to comment this out, then it would target everything. Okay? What would happen if I moved it above? This H1 above the star, what would happen?
Would it override background?
Would it override background? So what would be taking priority if this H1 was above the star?
The blue background, so everything would just be blue.
Yes, that's right. So if you highlight something and hold the Option key on a Mac, I think it is
Control.
Control, yeah, on PC. So if you hold Option on a Mac and press the up arrow, you can move a block of code that way. Well, in this case here, it didn't change. Okay, let's figure out a better example here. All right. Oh, I have one. I see. Because the red came after the white, the priority took to red, saying the rules that are on the bottom take priority over the ones on top. If I change the H1 to be below the red, Now priority becomes white. Okay, do we understand how that works and why that rule applies to the name cascading, which means from going from top to bottom, because the rules are written from top to bottom, but the ones on the bottom take priority. Okay, so let's just take a quick poll so if we can say that we understand that this is why it's called this, and this is the rule that takes place.
I have a question. Why is, if the star asterisk takes priority, right? Does it not take priority over H1?
This star asterisk is a comment.
The one at the very top.
That one takes priority over all, and it says the base background color for everything is blue.
So so the background doesn't include like the block of where like the H1, right?
It does include that, but then the rule below it said, oh, but in fact we want the background color to be red. And so then the rule below that one said, but actually we should make it white because I'm on the bottom and I take I'm the most important rule because I am on the bottom. So when we moved this one around, if I hold Option and press the down button, I can move it below. And now because this one is on the base, this one has the rule priority. So we'll make this one red.
Background.
But if you move the asterisk one all the way to the bottom, it'll still be red on that header, right?
Yes.
I think
Because
that's
I
what
think
John's
that's,
asking
yeah, I
about.
think that's what I was asking. So the background doesn't really affect the block, or I don't know what you call it, but at least that div example.
yeah, well, I guess with just specifically this star one that affects them all, if there is another rule written on the page, it will still take, even if this is written afterward. And so that's why you want to write this one first on top always. So that's just another general
So,
rule.
so either way, it doesn't affect the div, whether it's up or down, whether it's at the top or at the bottom. The background color, it's very interesting that the background color doesn't change the color of the div example.
It's probably just a shortcut in CSS, right? They probably wrote CSS to realize that if you have the H1 there, it wants it to take priority, is all that is.
Yeah, it's just
It's like an
an
override.
exception to the rule. So I discovered an exception to the rule while I was trying to explain, and it's just specific to the star symbol. In every
Yeah.
other case, what's written on the bottom is going to take priority.
Does
So-
that also correlate to like what's in the block, like in H1 bracket? You're writing a bunch of different things to change. Does it have to go in order, top to bottom?
Yes. So if I, for example, say, let's cut out one of these H1s and I say background color white, even in the same rule,
Hmm.
the one on the bottom takes over the top.
Gotcha.
So yeah, everything except for this star, whatever's written on the bottom will take over top. Okay, so let's go ahead and go into the lesson. So we've already connected CSS. We've linked it to HTML. We can now add some styling to our page. So what that means is that we can change the color of anything and give it some type of view. that's different than just plain text like a newspaper. So let's eliminate everything. And start from here. Okay. Here are some rules that I can apply now to my H1. I'll go into CSS and I'll target this H1. And usually I like to work with both HTML and CSS at the same time. So if I press that button there with that line in the middle, one that looks like a book, your CSS will go on the right-hand side. You can have your HTML on the left-hand side. You close it. If you read here, H1, color, Rebecca purple, font size 50. This is targeting every single possible H1 that could appear on the page. So if I write another H1 here, and I say example 2, but this is an H2. So that would not be targeted. Let me just write an H2 now just to prove it. H2. Okay. We can add some rule here, some elements to this H1, and it's to make the font this color of purple. Also, this font size affects how big this H1 appears to be on the page. So now the H1's increased in size, increased in color, but changed in color. And this H2 remains unaffected because this H1 rule does not apply to any of the H2s on the page.
Quick question about the CSS code. So you still have to add semicolons in CSS, unlike HTML, right?
Definitely, because check this out. What if I remove this semicolon?
Oh,
It'll break the whole page, and none of the rules will work. So you have to be very careful to add a semicolon between each rule.
this is even more strict than JavaScript.
Well, at least just with the semicolon, at least.
Yeah, okay.
And here's the exception. If the last rule in the selector doesn't have a semicolon, it will still work. It's only to separate between rules because otherwise it can't read it without the semicolons.
Okay.
Does the validating tool work on CSS, or is there a different one, or do we not have one that works?
There should be one automatically installed that, like, if you delete something, it will tell you what's wrong. You can also validate your CSS through that same website that we introduced, the W3H school. So what is it called? CSS validator. If you have something wrong with your CSS, you can just see if it finds it. Missing a semicolon before the property name font size. So you see, what's the rule? Font size, what's before it? Oh, it doesn't have a semicolon. So the CSS validator can help you find if you have any errors.
Okay, thank you.
One sec.
Oh, you guys are turning like Siri on for me.
Yeah, my Siri is going off too.
Gotta throw that thing away. Okay. Where were we? So, okay. We have color names, we have sizes. When writing CSS, we need to be aware of the selector, which elements we are selecting, and inside curly brackets, the properties that we are changing from their defaults. We'll talk more about which properties to learn in a later chapter, but for now, we'll turn to our attention to the selector. Okay, so we know that we can select things generally by this H1, for example, and we introduced the all selector, but there's a specific lesson for that one. We're not going to divulge into that yet. So just like HTML has different style of tags that you can write with p tag, you can target that p tag. Oh, and here's something I'll introduce. If you type in the word lorem, it'll give you this thing called lorem ipsum, which is some Latin, fake Latin text. It means nothing. It's just a placeholder text for if you want to see some words on your page. So here it is, some fake Latin. And so if I want to see a lot, like a huge paragraph on my page, if I say, for example, lorem times 5, and I have a big paragraph, and I can target that paragraph and say background color red. Siri's trying to order something. Background color red. Anyways, here it is. Background color red on this text. Let's say font color. If we want to affect the font, we say color white. It's hard to see, but there it is. I can affect the color. So what if we want there to be an exception? Let's change this to something easier to read. Maybe we'll make it light orange. Okay, that's a little bit easier. All right. So we're going to take this p tag, copy it 3 times. So we'll have 3 paragraphs in total. We want the middle paragraph to have the red text instead of white. So how do we do that? We go into this middle class here, this middle tag, this p tag, and we'll add a class. So we'll say class equals middle. Now I can target this one here by saying dot middle. I open the bracket and I say background or color red. If I refresh it, there it is. I've affected this middle one by saying class middle and then targeting that class on the CSS. I can give this class to multiple tags. I can give it to all of them. If I apply it to both here on the bottom, you can see here, this p tag rule is saying make all the background color light coral and the color white. This one that comes below says, but here I am selecting a class. So I'm taking priority by making a specific rule for this one. And I'm also below you. So I will take most priority in what rule of order I'm in priority. So because I'm saying this class is the exception for being a class, and also because it's below this p tag rule, you can make exceptions to whatever you place this class. So if I add this class to this above p and I refresh, the middle one will be white now because it has no class. You can take this, put this here on this middle one. Now the last one here, because it doesn't have a class, it'll be white.
So real quick, can you name your classes anything?
You can name it anything. You can name it, you want to make it relevant to what its purpose is. So this one should be called, this name, because it doesn't really make sense for all of them, it should be changed. If you highlight something on your text editor, and you notice that there's multiple of those words, if you hold down the command key and press D on a Mac, on a PC, I think it's Control D or Alt D. Control D. We'll say Control D. Then you can affect both at once. If you press the right arrow, then you can delete them both at the same time and write in both at the same time. So this, I want to say font red, because that's what the rule is that applies to it. Also, you generally want to write the class names in lowercase and separate the words by a hyphen. Okay, that's not an official rule, but it's good to keep things consistent. It makes the view easier to read. So now I'm going to have to change this rule here to font red, because that's the only thing it does. Okay, let's give some feedback on our understanding of how CSS works with the class selector. Okay. So let's continue. Besides the class selector, we also have an ID. And it does the same thing, except it's more important and more unique. So if I say ID font, if I say ID font blue, and I target this one here, font blue, I say color blue. This will make the background color blue for the paragraph, right? That's there, that's obvious. What I want to do now to show that this takes priority over a class is paste it in the same place the class would be for the middle one. What should happen based off what I'm telling you? It should turn blue, right? And that's what it does. So if you ever are using multiple IDs and multiple classes, if you're wondering why something's not working because the ID is taking priority, that's the reason. So be careful of that. Also, if you have more than one ID on your page, if you have more than one class or more than one tag with the same ID, if you copy this HTML code into the validator, it will tell you you have duplicate IDs. There's an error on your page. You shouldn't have more than one ID. So only one tag at a time should have an ID on it. So IDs take more priority. You can only have one at a time. Okay. I'm just going to run another poll to make sure we understand that. That's the only difference between class and ID.
So you can't have two separate IDs on the same page, or you can't use the same ID twice.
You can have different you can't use the same ID twice. You can have different ones, different IDs on the same page. You can make this one, for example, if there is a font orange. Let's say for whatever reason you had to give this one a font red and font orange. You can make this work. There's nothing technically wrong with this, other than this now has a class selector in it that's useless to it. So that's the only thing wrong with this. But this is technically still going to it's still going to work on the page. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so let's take a quiz here. Based on the code above, which selector would select the div ID equals title? Based on the code above, which selector would select the second div class equals main? Based on the code above, which selector would select the H1 tag? Also here, based on the code above, which selector would select all of the paragraph, the P tags? Okay, number one. Based on the code above, which selector would select the anchor, the A tag? Say all of the above. These are all true. Okay, so we have learned how to target something by the type of tag, by the class, and by the ID. So there's a lot to CSS besides this. There are so many rules in CSS. You can make images spin in 3D circles, and you can make really visual things if you learn all the rules. Okay, so we'll never fully go beneath the tip of the iceberg for CSS here. We're just learning how to style some text on a page, arrange some colors. We can make things rounded, but to make like 3D art on CSS, that's something you'll be learning how to do, maybe if you're so interested in it. Okay, there's a lot that you can learn with CSS. We're just showing the basics of how to style some colors and fonts, as well as arrange different divs on the page, which is most of the work. So that's what I'm hoping to get the most practice in with you guys. Okay, so we learned how to select something. We can also select something by the direct descendant. Okay, so what that means is, remember how yesterday we introduced the concept of the parent div. So we're just going to clear everything here. The parent div here, I'll just call it div, press enter. And in this div, I'll say class equals container. On the inside, I'll write 3 divs. Say div times 3. And I'll give each a class of no class. How about just no class? What I want to affect here in the rule on the right hand side now is container. And I'll say direct descendant div. I am now affecting this container, its direct descendants. So these 3 divs are the direct descendants of this container. Just going to open them up now. These divs can have their own descendants. They will have, let's say, 3 separate divs here. No, I want to make it like p tags. P times 3. I'll stick these p tags in each of these divs. These p tags are not the direct descendants. In fact, I'm just going to copy this, make everything just one p tag. Okay, these p tags are not the direct descendants of this class container. So they should not be affected by the rule that I'm giving here. So I'm going to say background color red.
Josh, I think you misspelled container in your CSS.
Oops. Yeah.
So that only affects the children, not the grandchildren. Is that correct?
Yeah, it affected the children. The children have the grandchildren, these p tags in them. These p tags inherit the rule just by default of their parents, but they're not inheriting the rule of having a background color directly. So I know there's a subtle difference there in a nuance of why this still applied. But the only rule I'm actually saying here is the direct descendant of everything that is below of everything that is within container, the direct descendant of this container. All the divs that are direct descendants give a background color of red. And so that's what I applied to these divs. So if I let's see, what if I'm trying to give an example here. In this container, if I say a p tag that will have some text, this p tag here that you see at the bottom, it's a direct descendant of container, but it's not a div. So it's a p tag, so it's not being affected by this rule. But everything that everything this div contains is going to have a background color of red.
Okay. So can you also say div and the parent of the p tags will give the same results?
The parent of the p tags will give the same results because
So
they
div,
just
yeah, so div, I guess greater than p should give the same thing, right?
yeah, well, if you've affected all the p tags directly, you can do that by writing it below and say background color.
No, I mean like div and then parent as a parent and then so if you
Yes.
could
So if I wanted to do what exactly? Make div a parent for what?
p.
So if I want to say div
Yeah.
p like this,
Mhm.
what I'm saying is all the divs on the page that have a direct descendant of a p tag, you can write a background color for blue and see what this would do. This would make everything blue.
It's the same result. Okay. But I wonder why the red is still stuck there.
We can inspect it. We can see here. If we right click on our page and we click inspect, this menu bar called the console will show up. And if you click on this tool on the top left here, this square with the mouse on it, and you hover over, you can see what rule is being applied to the thing that you're hovering over. If you click on it, it will show here, container, which we are affecting all the containers that have a div of background color of red, give a height of 40 pixels. So it's this height of 40 pixels.
Okay.
This height of 40 pixels applying to this one here that has a definite height. But because we're only affecting the P tags with background color blue, it's affecting the P tag, but not the background color of this 40
Okay.
pixel.
So why doesn't it cascade down there? Is it just because the height part overrides?
Yeah.
the
So if
thing
I
below
delete
it?
this, yeah, if I delete this height, that discrepancy is gone. It's because I add a definite height. So if let's change the height a little bit. So I'm only affecting the background color blue by making it a priority on the bottom and saying all the divs that have a child, a direct descendant called P tag, make that a background color blue. So it affects just the area where the direct descendants that are from container, that are divs, get the background color red. This one living outside is not going to have that rule applied to it because it's a direct descendant of container, but it's not a div. Then the ones inside here, we say all the divs that have direct descendants, which are P tags, make their background color blue. So if we change it back to 40, remember there's this div here that I think this is our culprit here. It's not making sense. Let me try to delete this one. Yeah, it was a div there that it was open and closed, but it didn't have anything in it. So it was just taking up some space there, confusing everything. So make sure you don't have empty divs that don't do anything on your page. It's a lesson here. Okay, so
Can you assign a color to a break?
nope, you can't. It's just an empty space. Well, actually, I've never tried. Let's see here. So we'll say break. I'll say break tags, background color, red. No, it's not going to work. No, they're just meant to add space. Okay, let's give some feedback on the direct descendant rule. Okay, so here I'm going to copy a form. And copy these rules. Here you can see I have this form called, its action is to do this process. Its method is to do a post. We haven't talked about actions or methods yet. This is something for later on back-end stuff. So we can delete this for now. But that's what it would contain, this form thing. So here we have a text type here where you can type in text. Username is the name of this input, and the value that it's looking for is Rebecca. This input is a type submit, so it's a button. And the value that you would enter when you click it would be the value you see here on the name. Enter username. So on the right here, we have some style to it. We said padding 5, border color. We'll explain what padding is in a second. But as you can see, there's a little bit of space around the edge of that input, that underline. Then we target the input. So this targets the same input, but we're targeting by type text now. And we say border bottom 2 pixels solid, this purple color. And this input type submit has a white color and a background color purple. So we're able to target things by their type as well. Type text, type submit. So that's important to note. We can still just target these by a class name as well. You just add class here. Class equals whatever you want to call this. And then you just call it on the class name, whatever here. But you want to give it a respectable name relevant to what you're doing. So you want to
Can
give
you also call it by the value or the name?
Yeah, you want to call it by the purpose that it's there for. So if this is for the input, type in input 1.
I think he means, can you call it in CSS by the name or
Yeah.
value on the left-hand side?
Yeah, like you have input type equals submit, input type equals text. Could you do input type or value equals Rebecca or name equals username?
No, we maybe you can. We don't. I've never even explored it. So I don't think there is a reason to do that with when you have class.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's worth trying, but no, we don't want to go that route, putting names and values on things that wouldn't normally have names and values. Usually the standard is to put class.
Okay.
So I will try it later and I'll go ahead and answer your question. But if I start doing it now, I'm afraid I'll start seeing people putting names and values on their work, and that would be weird. I'll get in trouble for that. So even if it works, I mean, hey, if it works, no, but there's usually a good reason. No, class is the standard you want to stick with. So but it's worth trying. I'll just try it later. Okay, so let's take this short quiz. Which selector will select all the elements in the page? 1, 2, 3, 4. Which selector has the strongest selector specificity? 1, 2, 3. Strongest specificity. Okay, why is it number 2? Because it's ID.
Brand ID?
Yes, and the ID takes priority. Which selector has the strongest selector specificity here? We're saying 4. So what are we seeing here? We're saying, what does this mean? Everyone that's answered 4.
Lists activate?
List activate. What?
List.
Why is
Saying
there?
list and then a class of active. So
Okay.
it's adding. right? So it's like the list has a value, and then the class of active has a value, and you add those together, so that makes it stronger.
Okay, so that's a good guess. I don't think we've gone over this to see what would happen if we saw this specifically, but we're going to learn here now. So because we've said it, we'll stick with it. Which selector will only select paragraph tags inside the div class box?
Shit, I have no idea.
Which selector will only select only paragraph tags inside div class box? We said 4 as well. Which selector will select all elements directly inside div class main? Two, three. What's the answers on 3? Let's take a look at the results. So we got them all right except the last one. This one here is saying all the LIs that have the active class. Which selector? The question for this one is what has the strongest specificity? The other ones were doing just class active, anything that had the class active. This one was specifying for only LIs that have the class active. So this is adding something on, making it more specific, all the LIs that have specificity. So that was a stronger selector. This one here, let's see the other options for number 5. Which selector will select all elements directly inside div class main? All inside div class main. So this one selects class main. It says all inside div class main. But this one says direct descendants, all the direct descendants. So this one is looking for all within div class main. Huh? What did we get here? Directly inside. Directly inside.
Yeah, directly inside, yeah.
That's why, because it's looking for the direct descendants. So directly inside div class main. So the direct descendants inside, all of them, they're direct descendants inside div class main. Okay. And now if we want to get more practice with selectors, we should play this game here. And you guys may have already been alerted to this, but here's a game you can play to figure out how selectors work. So for example, select all the small apples. So we see here apple, apple, apple. So if I say all apples, no matter if they're small or big, I'll just say apple.
Could it not be dot small?
Well, class small would select only all the small apples.
That's what they're asking.
Oh, small apples. I see. Okay. So then we say dot small. I thought it changed. I thought it was different than that. So if I press enter now, it'll change the plate. select the small oranges. Okay. So let's hover over here. This orange, when I highlight over it, when I highlight over this orange, it'll highlight all the similar ones. And they both have the class small. So if I say dot small,
I think it would be orange dot.
oh, you're right, because also the
'Cause it's
apples
not-
have class small. I don't want to target the apples.
Yeah,
So only the oranges. What about this big orange here? Oh, so we want to affect only all the small oranges. So we want to say oranges that have class small. Now we're sorry.
Says put your back into it,
Yeah.
right?
Select all the small oranges in the bentos. What's a bento? Oh, in a plate. Okay. Small oranges in the bentos.
Small oranges. So it'd be orange.
Orange class small. Within a bento. So I'll say
So it'd be like the greater than sign.
Um,
so all the
bento.
bentos, they have
the
the orange
Oh,
class small.
you're missing an O.
All right. Select all the plates and bentos.
With a comma, so a plate, comma, bento,
Comma, and then
something pickle.
oh, actually,
No, it's not asking for the pickle. It's just asking
Just
for the
plates
plates
and
and the
bentos.
bento. So that would be it.
Yeah,
plate,
there you go.
comma, bento. Yeah.
Okay, so you guys play this on your own to get better at it. You guys get the gist now. Okay. And anything else I want to go over here? I want to introduce some of next lesson's topic, but we're already at the end of the hour here. So we've pretty much gone over all the types of selectors, which are more specific. How to apply a CSS file in your HTML. So we link it here at the top. If we want to write things from scratch, all we have to do is when we create our HTML page, let's say I'm starting everything from scratch. If I say start or the exclamation mark, and I press enter, here above the title, if I say link colon CSS, it'll link me the style sheet. If I say link colon CSS, the href will point to the file that we have in the same folder called CSS style.css. So we have to create our CSS file with the same name. Okay. Easy way to check that it's properly connected is to target everything and give it a background color as I gave it in the beginning. Okay. That'll let you know it's properly connected. Then go ahead and change that. And then you know you're connected, so you can go ahead and work from there. Okay. All the styling now should be only on CSS. I don't want to see any styling on the HTML anymore. It makes the page hard to read. Plus, that's why CSS, it has these cool ways of making things more specific in targeting multiple things on the page at once. So That would conclude the lesson for now. Do we have any questions on how this works? Let's go over some of the assignments. Right now, the assignment is styling, this practice assignment, button up. So let's go here. It's in the box model. So we'll be going over what the box model is, how to add these margins on the end here to give some padding between each block. But for now, I'll just introduce it as a name, box model. We'll be going over how to move boxes around on the page. But for now, we just figured out how to target things by selectors and which selectors are more specific than others. Okay, so you get a whole point on your test just by linking CSS to your HTML and separating the rules out of HTML. So that's the purpose of CSS, cascading style sheets. This, we're going to be learning a lot more rules on what work in CSS to move things around on our page. Once we've connected that, then we'll be using the JavaScript that we learned in order to make things pop in and out to change on our page and save memory using JavaScript. So it'll have more functionality on our page. We'll be amazed at the things that we can build. All right, so for now, we're just targeting text and changing colors, moving things around eventually. If you're already working ahead, great. Bring the questions for the box model lesson that we'll have this afternoon. So you guys will go into Open Lab now, and then go ahead and go into lunch sometime before next lecture. Then we'll have a group presentation at the end of the day. So it's good that you build up your skills in today's lessons, styling, button up, plotting your blocks, because we'll have to apply those skills in a group presentation today. Okay, so thank you guys for participating. If we have no further questions, I'll end the recording. Okay, let's do a quick quiz. What does CSS stand for?
Cascading
Cascading
style
style.
sheets,
Why is it called that?
top to bottom.
Right, the rules on the
Priority.
bottom take, yeah, which rules take priority? The ones on the bottom. And then what's the difference between ID and class?
ID has a higher priority.
Right,
Call it with a hashtag instead of a period.
how would I select, what's the general selector if I would apply that?
In CSS, like, how would you call it?
The
Yeah.
star.
The
Star.
hashtag.
No, if I had something like just an H1, if I wanted to target it, if I wanted to target all H1s,
Oh,
Curly
yeah,
bracket.
you just say H1 and
Yeah.
then by itself. Okay. All right. Well, okay, I'll go ahead and end the recording now before we go into breakout rooms.